afternoon is one of the webinars where we'll be really focusing on advertising and within the cooperative context. As Fred's introduction mentioned, I spent 14 years managing the advertising for Union Cab of Madison Cooperative in Madison. Most of what I learned about advertising, I learned on the job from different ad agents, reading, and kind of my go-to, which I'll be referring back to, the Wizard Academy, which is a organization based in Austin, Texas, that looks at relationship marketing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how to pick the right radio station or print vehicle as much as how to push a cooperative message in your advertising. But first, let's get to the agenda. So we'll talk about some basic concepts and getting ready. And then, oops, I'm messing up here already. And it looks like my whole agenda didn't come through on the slide, but we'll talk about some basic ways of structuring an ad, and then also talking about building personas of your customers so that you can start thinking about how to build those relationships. And we'll finish with a discussion about appropriate budgeting for your advertising market. So first, some basic concepts. One thing, there's a great quote about advertising that goes, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." So the fact of the matter is, at some level, advertising is at its root a gamble. But I think the only thing worse than advertising is not advertising. This advertising offers you the ability to tell your co-op story unfiltered to the general public. Although you're telling the story, that doesn't mean it's fiction. So the point of advertising really is to attract people to your co-op that allows you then to meet the needs of your members. And in some cases, the people you're attracting to your co-op will become your members. For co-ops, it's about building community at the core, and that's done through building relationships. So the relationship model of advertising and marketing is a little bit slower to see results, but those results will carry forward over a longer period of time because you're building loyalty into the mix. And in this case, co-ops are perfectly poised to win people's hearts and by connecting the co-op mission to their needs. So, some of these basic concepts, right, is the choice of media doesn't make your ad perform. Your ad's going to make the media work. And you shouldn't be trying to educate people as more as trying to figure out what need you're solving for them. And I think some of our other webinars have talked about this, of finding the need that you're filling as an organization. Repetition is also very effective, and we're going to talk a lot about frequency as we go through today. And then how quickly you see your returns depend on what you're doing. So the more transactional advertising for sales and stuff, you expect a quick return. For relationship, it's going to take a little bit more time. And then finally, something I think that's pretty important is that not everyone who uses or will be doing business with your co-op cares that your co-op's a business, but they will care about how you help them. And so even if it's not driving people to be co-op zealots, there's still a great value to reaching out to them. So first and foremost is, before we get into the advertising, is to figure out who are your customers. And in the other webinar on digital marketing, Cooper Eaton from Story to Designs did a great structure about how to work through this. But part of it is looking at the demographics of who's using your services or what needs are being met. Looking at your MSA, which the MSA is a statistical area, so a metropolitan statistical area. So that's the larger area that your community lives in or exists in. So Olympia is really part of the sort of the Seattle-Tacoma MSA. You can also do some quick surveys, which is something we did at Union Cab. And then for consumer co-ops, you can also build a consumer profile. And thinking about some of this other aspects is, thinking about who who is not just who are the customers, but when you think about who the customers are, it's not just the individuals and organizations, it's also people who are in your community who might be what we call connectors. Some might say influencers. For example, before smartphones, the role of the bartender was critical for cab service, since it was often the bartender who would call for the passenger. So, you need to think about sort of what are the general makeup of your direct customers, the age, gender, income levels, and then each of these groups are going to have different wants and needs. Like for a cab company, we would consider anyone who didn't have access to a car a potential customer. So it gave us a really large community and we had to break it down. Quick surveys can help you figure out some of this, but even having staff doing quick eyeball guesses is better than nothing. This can be part of a fine-tuning process if you're using the business model canvas. What are the needs and wishes that these different customer segments have? What are the pain relievers and the gains that they can meet? But don't make the profiles the project. The goal is to figure out how to make your ads relevant, and that comes down to what aspect of being a co-op separates you from your competitors, and how are you going to get that message out. So what are the definitions of success? That's another thing before you start out, is to start thinking about what are you going to be looking at to make a determination whether or not your advertising is actually working for you. So this might be getting new inquiries into your business. It might be foot traffic in a retail location. You might want to look at total sales or average sales. And from this, you can create realistic goals that can be measured. So at Union Cab, we were able to get a lot of data because of our computer systems. We knew exactly where people were being picked up, exactly where they were going. We also knew how many times the phone rang every month and how many actual calls, how many actual taxi cab rides we did. So we could look at things like how many trips did we take to the airport? How many times did we pick up at the airport? We could actually look at every single hotel in town and know how many times we dropped off there versus how many times we picked up. And from that, we were able to establish a series of metrics that we could then use to measure and see if the advertising was working. For instance, I'll talk a little bit more about it later, how some of these metrics were used to be measured. The point is there's always something that you can measure, even if it's just how many times people walk in the door. And you can't necessarily always tie it to advertising, but by hitting your larger sales goals will tell you if you are having success in getting your message out there. So a little bit about the co-op advantage, which is kind of what we're talking about. The co-ops do have this advantage. One is that they're more trustworthy. Every time there are consumer surveys done around this, co-ops come out as people are more willing to shop at a business if they know it's a co-op. They trust co-ops. They trust them because of their sense of ethics and community. This builds a lot of relational and social capital and solidarity within the community. So there's already sort of a built-in advantage there for co-ops that they can use on just by having the co-op in your name. And by building this further into your messaging around the ethical values and social responsibility, the co-op messaging can do something in a way that's more genuine and real than most of its competitors can do. So one of the things that the Wizard Academy talks about is the two fundamental ways that customers engage the marketplace. And so transactional and relational. And of course, we're going to break this down even further later, but the transactional customers tend to be very short-term. They are price sensitive. They might consider themselves an expert. Sometimes they might just love the process and want to negotiate, and that's part of it. That's part of the whole experience for them is being able to get a better deal. Whereas the relational customers tend to be much more long-term. They're not going to just jump for the next lowest price. They will be repeat customers. They often don't necessarily enjoy the process at all. They just want to get their needs met. And they're kind of worried about being taken advantage of. So they want to find an expert, and they consider the time spent shopping as kind of part of the price. So it's it's just like I said, this is one of the core teachings of the Wizard Academy. But another great source for this discussion is from Nick Kalenda, who researches and publishes on how we make conscious and subconscious decisions. And most of the advertising transactional customer, right, thinks sales that tries to drive people in the store. So most of the advertising we hear is about trying to drive people in for that sale. But the relational customers end up being the ones who are going to be more long-term profits. One, because they aren't price sensitive, and they're going to stick around longer. The important thing to understand, though, is that people shift between these two aspects depending on what they're buying. So somebody who might have a lot of experience, maybe they're a mechanic, an auto mechanic, so they're going to be probably very transactional when it comes to things like tools and maybe auto service. But on things that they may not have as much knowledge or experience with, they might become a relational customer. And so it's not really that any person is one thing. That very often it really depends on their relationship to the product or service that you're offering. So there are 4 basic types of advertising, and like we mentioned, the sales are aimed at the transactional buyer. They're designed to drive business once, and so it's something you have to then keep doing, and you're constantly competing with other people on price. There's also what's known as branding, and I don't really consider this as relevant for local businesses. It requires a pretty significant impact. There are things you can do that are within the branding structure that you should be doing. And in terms of logo and your color sets and making sure that things are looking consistent. But the real branding sort of advertising campaigns, those are what you're going to be seeing national companies do, like Geico or Progressive in the insurance business, for instance. For co-ops, it's also about top of mind awareness. And what this means, it's kind of sometimes considered part of branding, but top of mind awareness simply means that when somebody thinks of, say, organic foods, they're going to think of the food co-op before they think of, say, Thriftway or Costco. For instance, at Union Cab, we wanted people to think of Union Cab when they thought, oh, I need a cab ride. And that would, in fact, you're going to hear the jingle in a little bit, but that's exactly what our jingle did. And then the 4th type is one we'll be talking a lot about today, and that is bonding instead of branding. So bonding focuses the consumer in their relationship to the business. This type of ad plays to the strength of our cooperatives. It's not just about a consistent or perfect experience. It's about building a relationship with the customer and everything that a relationship entails. And this is where we'll be spending most of our time today. So co-ops, as
John,
yes?
do you mind circling back on the relational customer viewing time spent shopping as part of the price? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So, it's more that they're going to come in and they're going to have questions, and they're going to, want answers, and they're going to want to kind of feel a certain surety or comfort that they're making the right decision. And so that might mean, maybe they're going to do research online first, or maybe they're going to come in and expect to talk with staff in the store or ask questions about it. I remember years and years ago, I was at a panel where the general manager of a food co-op in Minneapolis had just started there, and she had come from the private sector, and she was amazed that customers would come up to her and say things like, I don't have to read the nutritional labels when I shop here because I know you've already done that for me, and so, but it's because they know they can simply ask the staff what's, really the best choice for them. I hope that helped. So yeah, so co-ops, again, just really quickly, your mission statement, part of it is trying to connect your mission statement with your customers' needs and wants, and how does it do that? and I'll talk a little bit more about Union Cab's mission statement in some of the examples as we go through this. And then how do you reach them with a message that creates a bond? And you can read more about this at Craig Author, who's one of the Academy members. He does a whole part about bonding. Also, I think for co-ops, it's about building a local economy, and this is specifically for print and radio, so and TV to some point. So print and radio is often kind of seen these days as a bygone era of advertising and marketing. All the flash is on Facebook and Google and the internet. However, there's a lot of reasons why print and radio is still really valid for especially for co-ops. For one, radio especially has not lost its power as a medium. This is especially true with stations that have local programming or original content. Likewise, there are local publications, although newspapers have never quite figured out the advertising model. There are other print locations that can tie you and your co-op within the local community. So for print, it might be, theater publications, local journals that abound throughout our area, even college newspapers, and there's a slew of other things, of course. For radio stations, again, community and college radio stations, local talk and news can be really valuable for people, especially for news and people wanting to know what's happening in their community, if they're local DJs that are working, spinning things. And then for TV, again, it can either be local programming if you can afford being on like the news, the local news, or at least programming that can connect to the profile, and TV still allows you to pretty much really target some demographics. So some quick discussion here about print basics. And I think, again, this is where something, if you have people within your co-op that are really good at design, or maybe have even taken classes in it, it can be really good to use some of that intellectual capacity within your co-op. But you want something that's easy to read. You want to get make sure you're mentioning cooperatives or co-ops. And then again, talking about the local options. At Union Cab, for a while, or for years, we sponsored a local college baseball summer league team. And so, we would have signage out in the park, and we would basically give people, treat their wristbands that they would have to get entry into the park. We would treat them as a coupon in the cab afterwards. And so it was a way in the summertime to really have a strong presence in the community. But there are also high school and college sports, again, local theater, even billboards. For radio, it's worth knowing who listens to the station. And so you need to do some research on that. You can talk to the ad reps, ask them to report on who listens. For example, at Union Cab, I want to know how stations compared on people who travel for business 6 times a year. That's actually something they measure. It's with different ratings programs, or people who go out to eat 10 times a year. So a lot of stations will have that. They'll subscribe to that rating system, and they can actually show you the data. So they can say, we have 50% more of the listeners in this group than other stations in the market. And this way you can actually kind of figure out which are the good radio stations to be on. So for instance, we knew this one local news station, they had a huge number of business travelers listening to their radio station. So we actually ended up advertising our airport ads on their station. And that's also goes into owning your time slot. You don't have to, it's not always the most expensive time that makes a difference. So for us in that example, we ran the ad from like 2 in the morning until 6 a.m. It's the cheapest time of day to be on radio, but it's also the time of day when when business travelers are going to the airport. And so we ran an ad that was aimed at the person driving them to the airport, letting them know, for $20, you could be home sleeping right now. And what we saw from that one ad was a continual 15 to 20% growth in rides to the airport over 3 years, for example. So radio operates 24 hours a day, and you can find a time to reach the customers you want. And also, the most popular stations change throughout the day, and they aren't always public, or they aren't always for-profit radio stations. In Madison, one of the things we did more out of an interest of just being good community members, we sponsored a show on WRTFM, a community-owned radio station. The show was called Soul Explosion on Saturday night at 11 p.m. And then later, one of my commercial ad reps told me that at that time slot, Soul Explosion was the #1 show in the market. So we were paying something like, maybe $8 a week to sponsor this show, and it ended up being really one of the best places we could be on. Another ad rep told me that, he used to work with hospitals, and they would run their ads at around 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. in those brackets, just to catch hiring ads for nurses and other medical professionals who were leaving and coming into work. So I want to actually play you this ad. This is an ad that we kind of created from using data from a survey of customers and bartenders. I think I'll play the ad first, and then I'll talk a little bit about it.
When you need a union cab, call 242-2000, 242-2000, 242-2000, union cab.
So, is business picking up with the colder weather?
My business is picking up and dropping off.
Did you know that 9 out of 10 people that choose Union Cab would also recommend Union Cab for a friend or family member? Oddly enough, a driver's sense of humor rarely plays into this equation, and for that, we're thankful. More than likely, it's because of the safe and courteous drivers. You see, they've been trained to be that way. You also may not have heard that 3 out of 4 bartenders also recommend Union Cab. Well, they do, and they ought to know. When you've got a hankering for a safe, dependable, and on-time ride, call Union Cab at 242-2000. Driver's sense of humor, not guaranteed.
So why do you park in a driveway and drive in a parkway?
242-2000, union cab.
And it doesn't focus so much on Union Cab as on what bartenders think about Union Cab. And it was written and performed by a Union Cab member. One of the benefits of being a job that's good for musicians is that we were able to reach out to musicians to actually write our jingle. And so the key to radio is reach and frequency, and there's actually some other things too, but so basically reach is the number of different people who listen to one or more commercial announcements in a given schedule, right? So the different radio stations are going to have different levels of reach. Your biggest stations are going to have the largest reach, and but even the smallest stations are still going to be reaching out to tens of thousands of people. So again, it's understanding that what the reach is. The frequency is the number of times that the average listener is exposed to the ad within that interval. And then the combined metric kind of tells you how many times. So think of it as a hammer and a nail. The reach is how long the nail is, and the hammer is how many times you have to hit it to get the nail all the way through. So again, that reach is kind of meaningless though if people don't hear your ads. The reason for this is because sleep erases our memory to some extent. The frequency, usually most people say it needs to be 3, which means that the target audience will hear the ad 3 times within a 7-day window. And then anything over 6 is you're probably getting really diminished returns. You probably don't need to have the ads on that much. So usually when you talk with ad reps and stuff, they will work with you, and they have formulas to figure out how many times your ad needs to play to get that magic number of 3. But of course, it can vary. And of course, too, you want to make sure you change your ads up over time just to make sure that people aren't tuning it out. So you want to constantly have element of kind of surprise and newness to it. So if you've run an ad several times and you're well past 3, that might be time to change it. But you also need to be relevant too. So if your ad is a bunch of what you might call ad speak, people are just going to tune it out. Or if it tries to show off or just make a sense of humor without really telling your story, it's just going to decrease the ability of that ad to really bring people in. It still has to talk about what is the need for your product or service. And then finally, again, just keeping in mind that sleep is the one thing that's going to cause things to cause people to need that frequency and reminder. So when you're writing your ads, and especially for radio, and print is going to be a little bit more concise because you're not, people aren't going to read a dissertation in a print ad. They're going to want very quick pictures and blocks of text to get the message across. But a radio ad, you want to tell your story, and that means how do we create the relationships? So when we meet and tell our stories and we listen to other people's stories, we develop bonds of friendship, camaraderie, and loyalty. This is exactly what your co-op is trying to do with your customers. You need to tell your story, but also tell your story in a manner that allows the customer to hear you, become interested in your organization, and ultimately to form a bond and business relationship. This means getting to know your customers. And there's some, exciting ways to do this. It can also be a great way for marketing, for your marketing staff and even members and boards to engage outside of the walls of the co-op to really understand how the co-op's place in the community is growing and also become its champions. And so, this could mean, excuse me, doing a customer appreciation event that allows your marketing team or directors or the people responsible for marketing to learn more about your customers as people. Maybe even creating an advisory committee that can help folks see the needs and desires of what's going on. And then we're going to go into this a little bit, and you can also just create personas or characters and then build short narratives around them and start really writing your ads in a very personal way to those personas that represent composites of your customers. So again, generally there's, think of it as 4 large archetypes. So telling a story means tapping into these general human personas that make up storytelling. There is this kind of basic set of archetypes, but 4, but it could be as large, as 12, or you could probably even drill it down to even greater numbers, but there's a certain diminishing returns, right? The more you're going to be doing this work, and your message might get too narrow. So think of successful TV shows, and a lot of them will have. You'll notice that there are kind of 4 core characters. So think of like Sex and the City, where Seinfeld, Star Trek, Girls, et cetera. Even the New Testament has 4 apostles, and so these 4 archetypes tend to represent it's kind of all rests on sort of Myers-Briggs or Jungian archetypes. So in this example, I'm basing off a class I took in the language instructor used. So here we have on the y-axis, we have sort of these neighborhoods or archetypes moving from external energy to internal energy, right? So people that are really warm and diffuse versus people that are pretty cool and focused. And then on the I guess y-axis, we have people who are more in the moment, and then people who are more interested in kind of leaving a legacy and thinking about their place in the world. And so within that, you have these structures of where people are at. So spontaneous, we can give them titles. So in the upper left quadrant, you have the people who are spontaneous. Then there's humanistic, then methodical, and then competitors. And so, like think about where, say, in Star Trek, right, where Spock would fall in this, or the Dr. Bones or Scotty, the engineer, or Huru, or even, Captain Kirk. And so, business people really love these grids, and you could probably even do a Z-axis if you wanted to. But the key to all of these grids is, whenever you see these things, is that most of us live right in the middle, where it says a lot of people. And depending on circumstances, we might be more competitive, we might be more methodical, we might be more spontaneous, we might be more humanistic. We're going to probably have one of these areas as more of a home base. So I would put myself more in the sort of humanistic quadrant, kind of close to the border with methodical, but probably pretty distant from being in the moment, as an example. And you might want to think like where you would place yourself as well. So I'm going to kind of go through these next slides really quickly. I won't necessarily read them all. I will send them out to you. But so, going through some of these personas like this, I rewrote ads for each one just to give you an idea. So this is the on-the-go, the spontaneous person who, is unconventional, carefree, they don't want to be bored. So our ad was, the least stressful part of the night on the town should be getting there and getting home. Call Union Cab at 242-2000, then relax and save your energy for impressing the world. Whether it's the Frosty Ball or a special dinner, we have drivers to get you on the road and get you moving. For the up and coming or the competitor one, they're very goal oriented, determined, they don't want to be in second place. So for this ad, you work hard to be your best, so do the workers of Union Cab. And this one, I actually didn't use the word co-op, which I should have. So the workers of Union Cab, that is why we're the largest fleet in Madison. When you enter the room, the game is on. You don't have time to find parking or working up a sweat, walking between the Capitol and the UW. Call Union Cab at 242-2000. We'll pick you up and take you directly to your next event. You can spend your time preparing for the next challenge instead of thinking about parking. Here in Nurture, this is one that I actually really like because one of our competitors had big bumper stickers that said, safety is our goal. And so this is one I kind of wrote specifically for that. It said, for some, safety is a goal. At Union Cab, it's our mission. So Union Cab's mission, I should mention, is to create jobs at living wage in a safe, humane, and democratic environment. So, we created our business so we could have a safe place to work, and that means you have a safe place to ride. And then whether you need to get home from the store or get the kids home from soccer practice, you can count on a safe, dependable driver. And our drivers act like they own the company because they do. And then finally, the leader or manager, and again, people who are out on the front lines. So whether you're fighting for a better world or fighting the throngs to feed the kids, the last thing you need to do is fight traffic. And again, call Union Cab. So to create a persona, what you want to do is, your TV ad reps or radio reps, they can always write ads for you, and they're almost always willing to do the creative. But I think if you really want to get the connection between your co-op and your co-op's customers, let your marketing team or whoever's going to be doing it really understand who your customers are, and then you can work with the ad rep to try to really hone that ad. So the exercise can be very useful. On the next few slides, I'm going to take you through that example. We create a Union Cab, but it's a basic outline, and this is something, again, we're doing that work on demographics of who your customers are and what are their needs and stuff will really help do this. So we created this character. This is just one of many, but we gave them the name Jenna Walker Healer. So we, part of this is just really thinking about folks, and you're kind of making stuff up too, but it's you're putting this general persona together. So we had a lot of musicians in our cab. That's probably why we came up with the musician. But married, husband is a musician, household income's 80,000, a couple kids. They're a social worker. So trip purpose and the job, and you have that basic structure, and then the next step of this is to then, and I'm not going to read through all of this, but who is this person? And then you take those initial notes and you start fleshing it out a little bit more. So, they're a 2-income household. They have one car in the family. And so this is part of, again, what is going on with this person. And once you have this down, then you can start saying, well, what does Jenna, want? What does this person really need from us? What needs are what, again, going back to the business model canvas, what are the pain relievers and what are the gains that this person is going to be expecting? So in this case, the person wants to be able to trust the company because of the transportation needs of their clients or children. They want to be able to trust the driver. And they want to, because of their own personal values, want to know that it's a good corporate citizen. Do they handle complaints well? Do they try to minimize their impact? And then finally, whether or not you take cash or credit. And of course, we were probably writing this at a time when it was still, kind of iffy that some cabs didn't take credit cards, even until the beginning of this decade. So and then once you have these questions asked, then to turn it around and say, what are the questions that Jenna would be asking? If Jenna were coming and saying, I'm looking for a cab company, or maybe I'm looking for, a home care agency, these are the questions I'm going to have for the co-op. And so write those questions down. And then once you have this, you can actually start writing the ad. And so when you write an ad, this is actually relatively the easiest part. The 30-second radio ad is about 500 characters, including spaces, or about 100 words. You spell out the numbers. So instead of saying 7, you spell out 7, and that accounts for the time taken to say the word. Mention key contact info a couple of times, so phone numbers. We keep in mind most phone numbers really should have area codes now because of the amount of people that travel and don't necessarily have. I still have a 608 area code on my phone, so phone numbers are area codes are kind of important. And if you're using any intro or outro music like you would have heard on our radio ad, that needs to be accounted for the time as well. So the example here with this one is, I'll read that ad again. This is an 18-second ad with 12 seconds of the jingle on either side of it. So 6 seconds on either side. So type comes in, if you need a union cab, call 242-2000. The ad gets read, and then it goes out again with the same message. There is a special case I want to mention about public radio, and so public radio, and this would be like any community-owned radio station that's operating as a 501c3 organization, like Washington Public Radio, Oregon Public Radio Broadcasting, KNKX is a government-based one that's community-owned. They, because of their funding streams, they cannot allow any calls to action. So you can't say, come on down to the store and, blah, blah, blah. You also can't do comparatives. So you can't do any superlatives. You can't say we have the best drivers in the industry, or we have the fastest delivery times. That's simply not allowed. They tend to be much shorter, about 20 seconds. So this is one I just kind of wrote up when we were talking about doing it for one of our clients, Capital Home Care. I don't think it ever got used, but sponsors of this program comes from the worker owners of Capital Home Care Cooperative, a caregiver-owned home care providing home care such as cleaning, medication, reminders, assistance with hygiene, and more to seniors and people with disabilities living in Thurston County. Then what you can do is say, to learn more about the cooperative model works, visit capitalhomecare.coop. So you can have something in there to get people to come to your website, where then, of course, you can have more direct marketing and work. But in the ad itself, it really has to be pretty straight up and pretty much about you're supporting the radio station. And you can probably, if you listen to any of those stations, you probably have heard it. Okay, let's see here.
Just want to give you a 10-minute warning, John.
Okay, great. And yeah, I'm actually almost near the end. So one of the things that often comes up is how much should you actually budget for advertising? And this can be kind of a political football in some co-ops. Sometimes, especially in worker co-ops, they may not necessarily believe in advertising that it works. And there's a lot of good reason why people don't necessarily think advertising works, because, as I said at the beginning, very often there's a feeling, half of advertising doesn't work, but I don't know which half. A general rule is 2 to 5% of revenue should go towards advertising. So this is part of an overall marketing budget, right? This would be directly for advertising and not include other non-advertising actions. So you might do other marketing that isn't direct advertising, like coupons or discounts for seniors or that sort of stuff. That's still part of your marketing, overall marketing budget. And I would actually argue that your entire list of expenses, except for depreciation and interest, is your marketing budget, really, because it's about not just getting your message out, it's also about following through on the actions. But there are other important factors. So 2 to 5% of revenue towards advertising, but then, how long has it been since you advertise? How seasonal is your customer base? And what's the turnover in your community? So Madison, Wisconsin, at the time I was there, they had a basically a relative turnover of 25%, which meant that, in any given year, about 25% of the population would be new people coming in and 25% will have moved out. It's worth figuring out what that is for your community. So that kind of tells you that you need to do a certain amount of advertising, because it's not clear, in that case, one out of 4 people may have never heard of you, right? If you haven't advertised for a long time, it can take a while to build up that presence. So you might need to spend more on advertising initially to get it up. And then finally, seasonality. So again, Madison, as a state capital, but also a Big Ten college town, when summertime hit, basically after Memorial Day, it would lose roughly 50 to 60,000 people from its population for the summer. And so, also it being summertime, there's a lot less indoor activity. People are going out to the lakes and stuff. So the taxi cab market basically would drop about 30 or 40% for the summer. So, again, how much advertising you want to do. And as I mentioned earlier, our main summer push was not radio. It was being at the ballpark, which had a lot of, young people and young parents that were out, and that's how we got our message out. So we really dropped our advertising down. And then in the fall, when students came back, that's where we would put maybe a third of our annual budget would be in October and early November to take over, because of the football schedule and also a couple other major events, and also all the new students coming back. And that would allow us to kind of raise our profile so that by the time the snow hit, people would have our number on mind, and then we would kind of coast in the spring. So you have to kind of think how your budget is. Wizard of Ads will tell you that it should be consistent and just solid all the way through, but this is where I kind of differ from them. I think it kind of depends on what your business is. And if your business is seasonal, you need to really figure that seasonality into it. And then finally, your overall sales growth, you want to be in excess of what you are spending on advertising. So there's no, you don't want to be spending money on advertising if you aren't actually seeing growth in sales. And this gets back to the tracking of it. So, I mentioned a few things that we did to track. So trips to the airport, for instance. Sometimes it can be really hard, especially if you have skeptical board members who don't understand why you're spending that much on advertising. So anything you can do to try to find a method. So one year, and this was back in the days of Yellow Page ads, and the Yellow Page companies were flailing around for business because basically nobody was reading the Yellow Pages anymore. So they offered us this $500 monthly ad with a special phone number that would be online. And I decided to do it. It was kind of a lot of money, but I thought, let's just check it out. And what it turned out is that ad generated, because it was a special phone number, we could track the calls that came in directly through that ad. And that's what made it special. So even though we had a jingle with our phone number in it, we took this risk. And that ad generated 2,000 phone calls a month. And because we also had done our work, we knew that the average incoming phone call to our company, whether there was an order placed or not, was worth $6.50 in revenue. And the average cab ride was worth $14.50. So because we knew 2,000 calls were coming in a month, we knew that this one $500 ad generated between $13,000 and $29,000 per month in revenue. But most ads don't have that sort of direct connection. And so that's why, again, looking at your setting your metrics for success is really important up front so that you can actually say what this is. I think at one point I was able to really work it out where I think our budget for advertising generated about a 10-to-1 return, and it's still an estimate, but that's kind of what we kind of settled on. And so we could say our growth, which was we grew our market share within a 3-cab company, our competitor system. So there are 2 other cab companies, and we grew our market share from about 28% to 40% over 12 years. So, and each percentage point was worth about, about $100,000, maybe $125,000 in revenue. So, over time we were able to build up our market share, and we could again track that. So again, how easy it is for you to track that in your industry is going to vary a lot. We were lucky because as a regulated industry, people had to report their numbers to the city and share them. So we were able to see what everyone was doing. But this just goes back to figuring out the metrics beforehand and establishing what marks a successful campaign so that you aren't arguing about it after the fact. And then just kind of wrapping up here, quick review. So print and radio offer an opportunity to connect with local communities and organizations. Radio is still a very efficient and powerful means to broadcast your story. Win the hearts of your consumers and the mind will follow. So you're not trying to educate them, you're just trying to let them fall in love with you, basically. Repetition works, so we'll go back to reach and frequency. And then bonding campaigns connect you to your co-op's values and principles to those of your relational customers. And even if you shop out your advertising, you still need to know enough to make decisions. And so some of the resources, and we'll be sending these out. These are all very good resources to do a deeper dive into to this sort of advertising if you are interested. And I want to thank you all for.
There's a question.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there's a question from Oliver. Oliver says, my impression is that people are more likely to understand the phrase employee owned compared to the word co-op or cooperative. Do you have any thoughts on that as it relates to advertising and marketing for worker co-ops?
Yeah, I mean, employee owned is out there. I would say though that that the co-op sort of brand itself comes with these sets of values that employee ownership doesn't necessarily have. So, I tend to use the phrase worker owned, but you might also say member owned. I think though co-op is going to really be what stands out for people because most people, even if they don't really have a full grip of what a co-op is, they can tie it into, things like credit unions and food co-ops that they do know. Whereas employee owned gets a little bit amorphous. Not everybody necessarily can pick out an employee owned business.
And I think it's worth noting too that, just circling back on what you had said earlier, that the research shows that people do respond positively to cooperative. So just adding the, word co-op or cooperative to the name of the business immediately makes consumer trust and confidence in the business go up. So yeah, it's like John says, you're trying with your advertising and your marketing, you can explain to somebody what a co-op is once they get to your business. But in the meantime, yeah, you're just trying to get them there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I hope you found it interesting and provocative. Looks at print and radio advertising. Definitely do take a deeper dive into the different tools. If nothing else, the Wizard of Ad books are fun to read and pretty fun. He still does a Monday morning memo too that you can sign up. If you do hire a firm to do your marketing, that's great. I hope you at least are going to have some means of understanding their plans and how they talk about marketing and can help. if nothing else, you'll have the information to be able to help your marketing representatives do the best job they can for you.
When you need a union cab, call 242-2000, 242-2000, 242-2000, Union Cab.
Summertime is finally here. It's time for festivals, picnics, county fairs, and Mallards games. It's possible to forget how much fun you are truly having. That's why Union Cab wants to be your designated driver. Forget about parking a mile away from the festival or driving after one too many drinks. Call Union Cab. Riding in a Union Cab is easy. You'll arrive on time. It's fast, stress-free, no traffic issues, and you'll have a safe ride home. When you need a Union Cab, call 242-2000. That's 242-2000. Union Cab accepts credit cards or ride coupons. Union Cab will be at summertime festivals, Mallards games, and anywhere you need them to be whenever you need them. Enjoy a reliable, professional, and secure ride home without any hassles with Union Cab.
When you need a Union Cab, call 242-2000, 242-2000.